African American.
You are watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan-African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa. So good evening.
Good evening to you, Dr. Tata.
Yes. I want to welcome all of you that are joining and connecting on the continent in the diaspora. Today is another special exclusive edition with our expert, our brother, our compatriot, our comrade, our activist all the way from the United States on the feedback of Ethiopia. I mean, we've been talking about Ethiopia, and I want to really give a shout out to all Africans worldwide. I mean, we have made it the Africa we want, the one Africa, the Pan-African agenda, so visible, particularly on this conflict of Ethiopia. We've seen Africans rise up in every corners of the world, carrying up the Ethiopia hashtag, never again, together forever, and so I want to thank all of you that are connecting on this show tonight. Please make sure you share the link with one another, because today is going to be another heated conversation. We want to know what is going on. We've seen a lot of Ethiopians carrying up flags in the United States of America. In Europe, like we talked about it last time, there were more than 10,000 Ethiopians for 2 weeks in Frankfurt, Germany, amidst the COVID, and so it's just a momentum. It's a time that we're saying this is actually it. We either do it this time right or never. But we know that it's forever. It's not like now or never. We say it's now and forever. So if you are connecting on the continent, please make sure that you're taking some notes, because we're going to be giving very, very important information here tonight. But if you're also in the United States, somewhere around, I don't know where this conference is going to be taking place, but our brother Christian Gabriel is going to be telling us everything. There's also going to be a powerful session tomorrow, December 12th. African Americans and Ethiopians are rising up to say, never again. Ethiopia, we stand with you. So this is going to be a conversation for tonight. I want to thank your feedback, particularly, like I said, the followers. The last show where we had it with our brother sitting right here, it was massive. I mean, the feedbacks were just enormous. Ethiopians were so grateful. They were thankful, that, the diaspora is actually concerned about the happenings on the continent. But we're telling Ethiopia, we're not just even doing it for you. We're doing it for our continent, Africa. It's our responsibility. It's our right for every African to stand up now for Ethiopia. It's just a symbolic that is happening in that continent. But what is actually taking place in Ethiopia is being multiplied. That is taking place all over, because Ethiopia is the birthplace. It's the land of the origin. So if Ethiopia is affected, all of us can never be comfortable. Yes. So thank you once again for connecting. I'm going back live in the studio with my brother, and I want to thank you, brother, for finding time. I know how busy someone like you is, putting up not just your daily schedules, but trying to also be a voice out there, speaking on behalf of millions of Africans, not only in the court to defend their rights, civil rights and stuff, but also being an advocate for a whole continent that is actually in a turmoil. So I want to thank you so much for finding that time to sit, to educate us, to hold a conversation with us, particularly on a Saturday like this, where probably you should have been, spending some quality time with the family. But right here, you say, no, this one is very important. So I thank you. Welcome once more.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tata. I want to thank you, Dr. Susan Tata, for Pan-African TV and the mission that you've engaged over all these years. And I want to thank Marshall also in St. Martin for having brought us together. I want to thank you for having me on the last time. I want to thank your listening audience. Dr. Tata, this is a very important time in human history.
Yes.
Let's look at the globe and what's happening to our species.
Mm.
With the Industrial Revolution, as you know, we, in the West at least, primarily sought to advance using science and technology, but oftentimes in a way that destroyed nature itself. So we started excavating coal. And of course, if you are in a house and in the basement of that house, you have about maybe 100 sacks of coal. And they've just been sitting there. You've never touched them. You've never done anything to them. They're just sitting there. And then one day you decided to start burning that coal little by little, but you're in the same space. Let's say you're in the same biosphere. So the heat that's being produced, the carbon that's being produced, is trapped within that biosphere. And then later on, you start going after oil now, which is another form of carbon, and you start burning that as well, right? And so you advance into aviation and automobile and so on industry and a high degree of consumerism. But what have we done to the planet, right? We've consumed a lot of resources and we've not been good stewards. The human being has not been a good steward of nature.
Correct.
So we have global warming and it's a catastrophe. There was a meeting in Glasgow recently where all the world nations came together trying to fashion and craft projects and proposals and plans to restrict carbon proliferation and reduce global warming. Well, what does that have to do with Africa?
Mm.
Of all the continents, Africa is the least industrialized. Our motherland is the last repository of arable land and fresh water in magnitude that can support human life.
Mm.
That means those are the countries that have despoiled their own biosphere, their immediate space, and now in search of resources without which they cannot survive. Now, there are people like Tesla's Elon Musk and Amazon's Jeff Bezos who are now looking at the heavens. Question that arises, are we going to go as a species to the heavens with the same thinking that brought us this catastrophe? Colonialism benefited the West. But in a twist of fate, it really, maybe when you look at it, did not benefit the West ultimately in the contradictions that were created in way of racism and in way of imperialism and in the way of dictatorship and in the way of the lack of democracy. We
Absolutely.
want in Africa democracy. We want in Africa rule of law. We want in Africa the use of the resources of Africa primarily for Africans and to share with others in the world, but to do it in a way that is equitable. We want equity. We don't want to be recolonized as with the Scramble for Africa, the Berlin Conference in 1898, where Africa was just a chessboard for the major powers to manipulate and to play with our destinies. And the reason that Ethiopia is important, the reason that Ethiopia became the beacon of Africa is one, it was never colonized, but for that short period, when Mussolini's fascist hordes attacked in 1935, through 1941, when Emperor Selassie, with the help of the Allies, primarily the British, recaptured Ethiopia for the Ethiopians. What Ethiopia had done over millennia was it had developed writing. It had developed the maintenance of a record. It had developed the degree of nation-state cohesion. It had developed a narrative that was proud in the African-centered leadership of its people. It was not paying homage to some foreign king. It was not paying homage to some foreign president. It was paying homage to its own leaders, whether or not those leaders were benevolent or not, they were local leaders.
Mm.
And then you saw in the development of that statecraft, the development of a degree of self-confidence without which no nation and no group of persons anywhere situated can long survive. You know, the Chinese, before they recaptured their nation state after the 1949 revolution, whether you like it or not, they were subject to Western concessions. So in Shanghai, for instance, there were signs on walls of the Western concessions that said, no dogs, no Chinese allowed in China. So a lot of times, when you see the way China's government behaves, you have to understand where they're coming from. That is not to accept everything they do, but you have to understand that they themselves were victimized, right, by a colonial construct that in their own nation, in their own country, in their own space, diminished their common humanity. And so China is on the move now, and China wants to assert its sense of nationhood, its pride, its self-confidence. Well, we want that too for Africa. We don't want it to be the case that in Africa, our nations are led by people who are less than visionary, forget science and technology, forget good governance, forget justice, forget equity, forget partnerships. The reason that you can see no more spreading across the globe in the Ethiopian diaspora is that Ethiopians, let me just use the United States as an example. They have a proud narrative as pride, not selfish pride, but pride that is born of substance and a strong historical lineage of resistance against colonialism. They also are a community that is very diligent in way of acquiring the rudiments of education, science and technology, financial capacity. So in Washington, D.C., for instance, many of the parking lots are owned by Ethiopians, or they have an interest in parking lots. They have restaurants, they have doctors, they are lawyers, they are engineers. So you see a society that is very cohesive, very proud of its attributes as a group of people who are able to fend off colonialism and very networked. We need, as Africans in the diaspora, to be seized of that similar focus. It's no use really talking about what the West did to us in the 18th and 19th centuries if we don't learn what Emperor Menelik did. At the Battle of Adwa in 1896, when Italy was defeated, the first time that a modern European army was defeated by an African army was at the Battle of Adwa in 1896. The Battle of Adwa was fought against the Italians who sought to encroach on Ethiopia and colonize Ethiopia. The emperor at the time was Emperor Menelik. His chief of staff, or his right hand, was Ras Makonnen, or Duke Makonnen, the same gentleman that I've named my only son after. And why did they win? Well, they were able to unite the disparate groups, the people who were Tigrayan and Oromo and Amara and Afa. They were able to get together as one solid Ethiopian military force. They were able also to be nimble in their relationships, in that they worked with the French to develop cartography and map reading. They worked with the British to help them with their military capacity because, you're talking 1896, so you need to have cannons. You need to have rifles. You can't be coming there with some spear and a shield made of leather. It's not going to work. So they had to embrace a degree of cohesiveness, but they had to also engage a degree of technological sophistication. And so it was that technological sophistication, coupled with pride in their heritage, coupled with their patriotic identification as Ethiopians, all of that together, they were able to build a powerful force. And so when they met the Italians, they were successful. What does that mean for us today? Well, if you're going to call yourself a Pan-Africanist, I humbly suggest that you busy yourself daily reading as much as you can about the history of our people. And if you're a student, I would rather that instead of maybe doing something in the liberal arts, and I believe in the liberal arts, believe you me, I love sociology, I love history, I love graphic arts, but we need to develop a keen competence in emerging technologies, cybernetics, artificial intelligence. So which means we have to have a competence in chemistry, in physics, in mathematics, the so-called STEM careers, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. The Chinese, for instance, where they are, after 1949, went on a almost radical transformation to produce as many engineers as they possibly could. Why did they do that? They called Chinese scientists who were studying here in the United States and other countries to come home and to lend their talent, their intellectual talent, to the development of China. Like the Chinese or not, whether you like them or not, it's immaterial. I'm just simply telling you what it is they did. And so the same China, where the primary means of transportation was bicycle and they pulled rickshaws and they were an agrarian nation, is now one of the leading industrial nations on earth. Of course, I'm not pleased with their stewardship of the natural environment. I have issues with their governance structure. I believe in democracy and rule of law. It's different from what they do over there. But the United States itself is not a perfect nation, as I well know. The United States has its challenges. And folks here are doing our utmost to work those through, the systems that are devised to work those through. But I'm focused now really on what the Pan-Africanist community has to do. We have to see Africa as a prize that is desired, rather in a very avaricious way by many great nations. And we have to be careful to preserve that which we have and to use that which we have in a way that represents good stewardship of the natural environment, but focused on educating our people, networking our people, and partnering with our diaspora in ways that are meaningful, in particular in the area of science, technology, and engineering partnerships. Because if we are going to be a dynamic and transformative African motherland, we will not get to that place if we do not have the capacity to create new products and new systems and processes from that which we have been given by Almighty God.
Absolutely.
And
yes. Yeah. No, I was still, because this is a kind of a small delay. Very perfect what you're saying. Like, we already have the creative talent in this sector is what Africa has been given. I don't know any other continent or planet that has the creative art, be it in music, be it in theater or visual arts. All these components of creative art, it's like we just born into it. But what you're talking about STEM that is bringing to us, you would also believe, like you just brought the examples of how many engineers and doctors and technicians and with all this competence in artificial intelligence and all that are of African origins, but that are serving the West. It is the same thing. Like we say, if you look at doctors, the number of doctors that are from Africa, from Nigeria, for instance, where we say more than 300,000 doctors, Nigerian doctors are the ones serving America. So you can see the whole intelligence that you're talking about, even that know-how and the diaspora is here working for the West. It's a typical example, you sitting here in front of us, right? So like these are the origins that we know. We're not saying that everybody is going to go in. So I know, and I've been talking particularly like to elderly Germans, like in the 90s, I did a short research just talking about them. And most of them are really saying, to be honest with you, Africa is waking up and the intelligence that was taken from Africa through slavery and colonization brought to build their own civilization. If the West would for 1 second lost it, then it's game over. Isn't it?
Well, I tell people this, it's not a zero-sum game. Folks in Germany and England, are fellow human beings. They are brothers and sisters as well. And in those populations, not everyone is racist. Not everyone has a colonialist mentality. There are a lot of people who are progressive In England, for instance, the abolitionists were very strong in the movement to abolish slavery. So we give thanks to God for progressive people of all colors and all creeds, because our struggle is not one of racial hierarchy and superiority. We come respecting what Dr. King said. Dr. King said that we have a rendezvous with destiny, a destiny where we treat men and women not by the color of their skins, but by the content of their character. So I believe in Dr. King's famous utterance because it really humanizes us. But the point I'm making is with regard to the Africans in the diaspora. The first thing I did when I graduated and I had the means is I built a home back in the Caribbean, and I started to engage with Africa. And so the government that was most receptive was the government of Algeria. And we brought Algeria to Washington, D.C. for the first expo in the history of Algeria at the Ronald Reagan building. Because when I went to Algeria, I found out Algeria made television sets. Nobody knew that in Washington. They make telephones. Nobody knew that in Washington. They make washing machines and refrigerators. Nobody knew that in Washington because the news that comes out of Africa is very negative. It's very negative. It's generally one of poverty and dictatorship and starvation and so forth. So being a Pan-Africanist requires you to look at the better aspects of your people and not to allow your mind to be befuddled and to be burdened by the negative aspects that do exist. We do have issues, but we have to look for those countries that are doing well. If Rwanda is doing well, let's work with Rwanda. If Algeria is doing well, let's work with Algeria. If Ghana is doing well, let's work with Ghana. If Ethiopia has dynamic leadership that's embracing and enabling, let's work with Ethiopia. And our position must be to our leadership is, folks, stop that nonsense, of having it be that government is for your friends and family. No, government is not for your friends and family or for your tribe. Government is for the benefit of all your people, with systems of justice that work, with judges that are honest, with education systems that are open and dynamic and transformative, with economies that allow for the creative processes, as you've referenced, Dr. Tata. We as Black people, we're very creative, for creative geniuses to explode in that creativity, for that process of enterprise to be dynamic and ongoing. We cannot allow for Africa to be set back because our diaspora is not accepted at home, that people have to flee the lands of their birth in rickety ships to go to the same Europe that grew wealthy on the backs of Africans. So African leadership in the 21st century must be mature.
Correct.
And every leader must say, what am I doing in my country, in Angola, in Mozambique, in the Congo, to be number one, a leader of Pan-African sentiment, which means I respect Africa, I respect my people, I respect myself. Number two, what am I doing with my economy that makes it a place that creates a degree of an enabling environment to attract foreign direct investment, in particular from the diaspora? Number three, what is it about the society that I have that will allow for Cameroonians of talent to remain in Cameroon? Doesn't mean you can't visit and study overseas, but to find a way back home and to invest your creativity, your money, your competence in the country of your birth. That is the challenge. So the Pan-African challenge is not simply a challenge of what the West has done. We know what the West has done. Look at where you are. Look at where I am. Okay? That is a product of, I didn't come here because I fell out some spaceship in heaven. I'm the descendants of Africans who were enslaved to build up the Americas. What now must I do? Well, I can't simply lament the past. I must use the past as a guidepost and as a basis to propel me forward to a better future. To say, that was then. I am not going to allow it to happen again. I'm going to educate myself and my community and dedicate myself to my community and to insist on leadership that will be transformative, that will be honest, that will be visionary and just. And that is why we're calling not only for folks to attend that conference tomorrow on Ethiopia, which I shared with you, which is going to be on Zoom, not only to talk about the importance of supporting the duly elected and constituted government of Ethiopia and the need to end that silly war, that cruel war that's been imposed on Ethiopia by tribalism and tribal constructs and thinking and backward thinking, but to look at the opportunity we now have. Look at the dynamism. I didn't know you until now. There's a reason for that, Dr. Tata. And we must use this connective tissue now to call for an All-African People's Conference on Science and Technology Partnerships, so we can build that indestructible bond between our people on our motherland and in the diaspora to do things, as my father would say, that are meaningful, things that are going to help the farmers in the countryside to have access to clean water and to have access to clinics. If they are sick, they can be attended to have university partnerships between African universities and universities on this side that are interested in honest partnership that is mutually beneficial. That's what we want, and that is what will build the better Africa that we desire.
Absolute. You also engage in, like agriculture is one of, like, you already talked about the arable land that all of us know. Statistics give us that, we have 60%, but I know that we have even double anything that statistics give us. And we are not in that ability, like you said, we're not in STEM to be able to even give our own stat. Then everything is questionable. Now Africans are just questioning every other thing. It's not just even a matter of us laying on the past, but it's easy to really just like, no, we have to walk past the past, but you still are walking past the past. But things that are happening, particularly like the one on the continent in Ethiopia, is not Ethiopians and Tigrans just fighting. We know that America or the Western powers or allies, it's not about racism, it's about straight talks. And so Africans, each time they raise up their hands, that's what the community is saying, you get another. What happens that in out of a sudden, the continent is just being chopped up in places, even in the times of pandemic, there are conflicts here, there are conflicts there, and then that's the questions that the Africanness that we say, let us focus on this. Young people are jobless, they're doing everything. If they're not entangled in the need for bad leadership and governance that are in partnership also with the Western allies, so Africans are just like, we can breathe. What is it that we should do? Question.
Well, first of all, Bob Marley said it years ago, and I believe he was right. I know he was right. Bob Marley said, and I'm not much of a singer, but I'll try to sing.
Go ahead.
Just a little bit. He said, what a beautiful thing it would be before God and man to see the unification of all Africans. Bob Marley was a strategic genius. He realized there's no development without unity. So every time there's a movement in Africa that you see economies growing by 7, 8, 9, 10% at a faster rate than the United States economy, Germany's economy, England's economy, then you see folks coming in to encourage a ball of confusion. That's what's happening in Ethiopia now. The tragedy and the cruelty of the folks who started this war under the TPLF is that where they are from in that northern part of Ethiopia is very arid. It's very dry. The terrain is very inhospitable. And I said to myself, why couldn't these brothers, because that's what they are, even if they're misguided and they've engaged in treason, but they are still family. Correct. Why couldn't they have sat down and said, look, we've been in power for 27 years. That's a long time. We're now out of power. Well, somebody once said to me, you don't have to always lead from the front. You can lead from the middle. You can lead from the back. And why don't we call a conference together to see how we can convene a meeting of Pan-African soil scientists,
Yes.
Pan-African botanists, Pan-African experts in civil engineering who know how to cobble together irrigation systems, be it regular irrigation or what the Israelis have done to turn their desert green. Israel has allowed the desert to bloom. And how have they done that? They've done that by drip irrigation. And so Israel now, a place that maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago was very inhospitable, they're now a major citrus exporter, exporting all kinds of mandarins and oranges and grapefruits and pomelos and all these kinds of things, tangerines. That is what they ought to have done. And that would have been a better use of time and resources. That would have been a better use of the human competence that they undoubtedly possessed. Unfortunately, they decided to use their time and resources to start a war, fratricidal war, useless, cruel, quite frankly, wicked, that has done nothing to help Ethiopia or their own people or their cause. There's no future for us in Africa. None. In tribal warfare, we have to find a way to create a more mediative culture. And by that, I mean a culture where we can mediate conflict. Because conflict is natural. It happens. Husband and wife, mother and father, boyfriend, girlfriend, conflict happens. But we have to find a way when conflict arises. I can't just beat my wife because she said something I didn't like, or she beats me, or I just, leave the house and never come back and stop paying for my children's upkeep because for some reason, I had an argument. We have to find ways, just like with families and communities, to resolve conflict in ways meaningful without resorting to warfare of the kind we now see in Ethiopia. The word within the past week has been very promising. The folks in the TPLF have been defeated. In the cities that they occupy, they've been pushed out. And I'm hoping that they will go back to Tigray, lay down their arms, surrender, and sit around the table to talk about the things we discussed over the past few minutes in agriculture, in STEM, in things that are creative, that creates a better economy, where you have food security, so you don't have to be, having musicians make songs, we are the world, we are the children, to raise funds for starving kids because the folks who were supposed to be taking care of the farms were killed. The botanists who were supposed to be in the lab doing the botanic science, they ran away. The soil scientists who were supposed to be putting the potash and fertilizers to create more affluent soil sectors, the soil scientists were killed. Or they're somewhere in Germany or US because they can't stay in your own country with folks that are shooting bullets. You can't really have any serious science research and develop in the midst of a fratricidal war. You can't really create a durable laboratory network doing serious research and development where people are shooting bullets. You have to run for your life. So we need to understand that we need to, not just in Ethiopia, but across the continent, craft cultures that are more given to mediation, resolution of conflict, so we can have a better world, a better Africa.
Absolute. That's very, very correct and important. And that's what I think all of us that are watching, or even the leaders on the continent and in this crisis or in the conflict zones, should be paying attention to. I think that's very sane for us to understand. The moment we fall into districts and are always in conflict with one another, nothing would ever stand. How do we build an economy on the bullet where children cannot go to school? The situation in Southern Cameroon. Until today, the leaders that were held in Connective are still in the prisons. There is no peace that we are seeing that will come soon. Why don't just sit on the table, negotiate, and come out to a peaceful solution, better for all of us and for the economy? I think that's very, very accurate. And I know that we are learning, everyone is learning on this new journey. We had a couple of guests that actually were talking about the issue of family. A family unit is also what the Africans should be learning now. The necessity, like you said, conflicts start even from the home before it spreads up to the continent, as a matter of fact. But anyway, those are issues that would come with time. Just tell us a little bit about that of the seminar that you're having tomorrow, December 12,
Yes.
2 p.m. What is it
Yeah,
going to
so-
be about? Yes.
Yeah, it's the American Ethiopian Public Education Committee. The American Ethiopian Public Education Committee, APEC. I'm sorry, APAC, American Ethiopian Public Affairs Committee. So we don't own the major media, right? We don't own Al Jazeera or C-SPAN or not C-SPAN, CNN or any of that. So we have to be able to work with Dr. Tata and Pan-African TV and grow Pan-African TV so we can have alternate voices. We can have more reasoned voices. We can avoid the sort of bias that we see in the dominant media. And so this is an effort to engage in public education on the situation in Ethiopia, why it must come to an end, and why we must not treat the Ethiopian government as an outlaw regime when it's maybe the most democratically elected government in that part of the world. Ethiopia is a democracy. It's a country that is recognized by the United Nations, by the African Union, by the United States, the United Kingdom. Why then do we see a lack of willingness to allow that government to do what? Let me give you an example. In 1861, after Abraham Lincoln was elected president of the United States, the southern states, places like Virginia, South Carolina, that did not agree with his views on slavery. He was an abolitionist. He believed in the end of slavery. He did not believe in slavery. And the Republican Party of the United States is not the same Republican Party we see today, was considered a radical party because it was peopled and led by folks like Abraham Lincoln, who were abolitionists. They wanted an end to slavery in the United States. So when he was elected, the southern states, starting with South Carolina, decided to secede. They wanted to leave the United States. And in South Carolina, there was a U.S. fort called Fort Sumter, S-U-M-T-E-R. Okay? And the southern forces, led by a former U.S. Army officer, Jean-Pierre Toussaint Beauregard, gathered the artillery and they shelled the fort. They told them they were going to shell the fort because they wanted them to surrender, and they refused. They shelled the fort, and they shelled the fort into submission. What was Abraham Lincoln to do? Abraham Lincoln called for 75,000 men to lead an offensive to put an end to the rebellion. Abraham Lincoln was the duly elected president of the United States, and today still remains the greatest president of the United States, because the United States we have today is the United States that his leadership and his martyrdom created, the United States that ended slavery. The United States Army we have today is really a revolutionary army in a way that sometimes, because of recent events in Vietnam and Iraq, it has lost its way. But that's the army that ended slavery, and that's why we always have to hope for better. And when the United States or Union Army went down south to end the rebellion, how would it have looked if the major countries of the world said, "Oh no, Lincoln, you mustn't do that. You've got to give them, you've got to lay down your arms and sit down and just negotiate with them," and so on. These people had committed an act of treason. And they had to be brought to book. They had to be reprimanded, arrested, and dealt with. And that's what the United States did. That's why we have a United States today. That's why there's not a North and a South, although there's still these elements within U.S. society. And so, like with Ethiopia, on November 3rd, 2020, the forces of the TPLF encouraged members of the Ethiopian army to kill their brothers and sisters in their sleep, to kill them, hundreds of them, and to steal the arms, and to try to march on Addis Ababa. How can that be right? How can that be right? That someone who you were in an organization with, you were a captain, he was a corporal, you were a colonel, he was a major, you were a general, he was a lieutenant colonel, you turn on your brother because of tribal hatred, because of a lust for power, and you kill them in their beds when they're sleeping. That's what happened in Ethiopia. And that's why the folks who did that can never win, because what they did was murder. They committed acts of murder. There's no war declared. This was not a foreign country invading another foreign country. These were family members. It's like a husband having a problem with his wife. They had a quarrel and she goes to sleep, and when she's lying in her bed, he bashes her head in. You can't allow that in any civilization. It's wrong. It's always been wrong. And so that's why we ask for the folks who are involved in that kind of tribal murderous warfare to cease fire. Drop your arms. Give up this ludicrous, wicked enterprise. Understand that as a segment of Ethiopia, you cannot on your own sustain. You have arid land, that your future resides within a communion with your other Ethiopian brothers from different segments. Amara, Oromo, Afar, Tigray, all working together on the basis of mutual respect in an environment based on equality of opportunity and rule of law. That's what we want for Ethiopia. That's what we want for all of Africa. Indeed, that's what we want for the United States. And it's not going to be easy, but nothing good is easy. I always tell people you can build a house, take you 12 months, and you can burn it down in one night. So it's harder to build than to destroy. But that's life. And anything that's worthwhile takes time. And we must engage the time necessary to build a better concept of African development and African unity. And that's why this conference tomorrow is very important. And we ask as many people as possible to join us for that process.
Thank you very much. How does the plan looks like? We're seeing that you are and the others are going to be talking. Like, what kind of agenda do we expect? I mean, it's an education format. Are you standing up to say? Let me see the topic, which you actually sent here. Is like, where do I get it again? Sorry. Well, 1 second, please. I like the topic, and that's why
it's
I really want to
trajectory for Ethiopia. So that means the trajectory that the TPLF and tribalist forces have is one of utter destruction and a dead end. That's not the trajectory we want. The trajectory we want for Ethiopia is peace, love, unity, progress.
Yes.
Okay? Peace, number one. Without peace, you cannot build anything.
Yes.
Without peace, forget about food security. Forget about industry. Forget about a dynamic agriculture sector. Forget about the diaspora coming back home and build homes. Who's going to want to come back to Ethiopia and build a home?
Absolute.
If bullets are being shot left, right, and center, who's going to want to do that? No reasonable human being wants to get engaged in that. They'll stay where they are. So changing the trajectory of Ethiopia is the subject for tomorrow's conversation. And it might as well be the subject for every single African country, because in almost every single African country, we have issues, some greater, others smaller, of governance that we can improve upon. And we hope that by this virtue, we can be engaged in a very rational conversation that's aimed at peacemaking, that's aimed at doing things that are productive. As I said to my friend the other day, which African leader, Sister Tata, in the 20th century, now we're in our 21st year, and we're almost done with 2021, has convened a conference on African botanical science. Africa is a treasure trove of world botany, variety of tree life we have, plant life we have. To sit down and catalog and research and to have an all-encompassing, globally networked Institute of African Botanical Sciences. IABS, Institute of African Botanical Sciences. So that somebody in Kampala, Uganda, somebody in Kwando, Kobango, Angola, someone in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, someone in Nairobi, Kenya, can go on their computer using internet protocol and see plant life of a particular genus that needs attention and figure out what is the best way to deal with the pest control for that particular plant, which is a plant that maybe is useful for the nutrition of the people in that particular community. How are we going to deal with pest control? You've got to have that. Until you can get to that level of sophistication,
yep,
the leadership we have is wasting time.
Too much.
When you're president, when you're prime minister, you have power. You have the power of your office to do things that are transformative. Stop wasting time going to buy Bentleys to drive around Paris and shop for Louis Vuitton for your girlfriends and that kind of nonsense. Stop going putting your money in offshore bank accounts while people are starving for laboratories to do their physics, chemistry, and biology and botanical science to make their villages better. Stop wasting our time. Stop coming around talking about fancy things, and then when you're not able, you go to China and get a loan because you've not been able to aggregate your own capital. Or you go to the World Bank because you've not been able to aggregate your own capital. You've not been able to develop your insurance sector, your small business sector. So we have to be focused on things that are productive, with leadership that is conscious and leadership that is competent. Focus. My wife says, energy flows where the focus goes. Let me repeat it. Energy flows where the focus goes. So if we focus on things of the kind, like I said, the International Association for Botanic Sciences or the International African Botanic Society or anything like that that allows us to get our respective human resource competence together in one place. And now with Zoom and with Go Meet and Google Meet and all those things, WebEx, we can do it in ways that we couldn't do it pre-COVID. So COVID had its own benefits in a quaint way.
Absolute. Anyway, in the next coming, as from January, we're not going to be using Zoom anymore. We're going to be using Conference in Africa. We also develop our own Zoom technology that is combining WhatsApp and all other Google products and even more. Like you said, these are all things that we need to start engineering. We can still use all these instruments and money still goes into the accounts of others. That is not also going to be productive. So building platforms is really, really one of the things that I'm so excited that I shared it, because we developed that. I mean, I'm not a developer, but also, I mean, Africans like you out there in the States say, no, we need to develop an app that we can host our own meetings and conferences and stuff like that. And so that we can keep some information that we need within us if we want to start to reboot the systems or to build our economies or where we need to put our money. There's really some key informations where, other communities that what you call artificial intelligence or their intelligence in terms of also protecting their data and stuff like that. So yes, maybe the next time I'll be calling you is for us to launch that conference in Africa. I'm really excited about it. Tomorrow, how do you want us to do it, Brother Christian?
Well, if you can share if you can share the link, if you can just share it on your site, folks are going to call in. We're going to ask folks who can contribute to the cause to contribute using PayPal or what have you, because it costs money to do education, because it's an education campaign. But most importantly is the information. Let the information go forth. I'm so happy to hear what you just said. I'm so pleased to hear what you said, that next year we'll be using new platforms that will marry things like WhatsApp and other systems together. I said to myself, there's a MoneyGram, tens of billions of dollars. There's Western Union, tens of billions of dollars. I want it to be that within the next year or two, we have a serious African money exchange program owned by Africans
It's already existing. Like we say, all this combination in Conference in Africa, pay bill function is there, airtime transfer, money transfer. I mean, just things that, others are doing. And you see exactly that's what you're saying. This pandemic actually is one of the biggest opportunities that Africa has had to have. For this reason that me and you are here today.
Yes.
Never would have been. It's just, it took us just maybe 1.5 years, and now we're developing explosive platforms that would be unbeatable. And this is a legacy for the continent, for the young people. You can imagine how many jobs we're going to create in this industry for young people. Or even though we have the money, we still always put it in other things that are never going to be. We still always put it, like you say, in Western Union. If you look at the charges that, or we have a function that you can call the whole world for free. Africans can call. You can imagine how marginalized we've been just to call out of Africa or calling from Africa back. And these are all things that Africa has never enjoyed. But now is the time, is really our time, like you're saying. Why should we be in conflict when we already have the green light? When we have things that are creating us those opportunities? It is just not the time for us to fight. Probably we were fighting in the past, but at this time, at this decade, in this last 2 weeks or 3 weeks of December, that should be the last thing that should be happening to the continent, because as from 2022, it's a whole boom. We've seen the world. Probably in the next 3 years, we're never going to see anything like dollar or anything again. Crypto or blockchain technology is just all around. What are we doing? Busy fighting, they're busy developing. And when we finish fighting, then we start consuming and putting all the money back into it. No way.
Dr. Tata, I think you're brilliant. I think you're brilliant in that you've provided us with a platform to have this kind of discussion so that our policymakers or leaders or boys and girls can be seized of a new vision. A vision that's rooted in, again, I use a word my father liked to use, meaningful. That brings value to Africa, not take value out of Africa. That allows us to do value adding to our products. Let me give you an example. How many African countries now have major chemical industries that are rooted in the science of chemistry to take elements or substances of one kind and transform them into substances of another? How many African countries right now have research and development institutions that involved in metallurgical science? How do you create composite materials that will not rust under the particular environmental conditions that may not be conducive to regular metal, like iron? As you know, oxidation takes place, iron rusts. But now we're in a world where through chemistry and it's blending with metallurgical sciences, you have all kinds of products being produced. But you need, again, an environment where our learned people on the continent can marry their competencies with our learned people in the diaspora, using internet protocol, using virtual conferences, and then meeting up in person, and governments that are going to be supportive of those initiatives. We need governments that are led by the best of our people, not the most venal and corrupt. Governments that are led by the best of our people, not the most venal and corrupt. So one of the things I'd like as a Pan-Africanist to say is that in every African country, there are term limits that says you serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. You do that, and then you move on to do something else. You go teach at the university. You go work in a farm. You go work in a library. You set up some institute. You don't have to be sitting in some palace for 40 years. 40 years, some of these leaders. As if the country is their own. So we need to understand that a lot of the problems that we confront are problems of our own making. Yes, the West has been there and has done what it has done, but I'm now not focused so much on what others have done. I want to know what it is we are doing and what it is we are going to do.
Absolute. Perfect. Enough of distraction. What can we do? What have we been doing? I want to call our attention to say, yes, really, really good things are coming, and we're seeing the young leadership of the continent is also going to be in place. So probably one of the biggest things that I think I mean, you've said everything is so perfect, but I think the key message that we should be leaving this conversation today that you just broke out and the others have been saying is like, we by 2021 December 31st, we have to leave the past behind. If we can just for 1 second do that, our healing process has already started. Because what is going to come to us, I think what we should be more focused on now, like Africans, is are we going to handle the change that we're coming to? Are we going to be able? Are we ready to handle the change? It's the same thing like you talk about the diaspora. We are raising voices, or the continent or organizations are like, we need our unity. Diaspora with the skills. Come back to the continent. Are we ready? Is the continent ready? Have we infrastructures in place? Yes, I want to go. I want to do this. Have we put even integration processes in place? It's the same thing that the change is coming and we still don't even believe it. It is already here with us. We're already in that place where now we should be worried how we're going to manage our wealth that we're going to create. That should be the point. Rather than going back to be fighting, now we already have our advocates here, sitting here, and these are all competent guys in terms of international laws. They know how it all operates. They're all our brains. Our brother Gabriel sitting here in front of us is an international unbeatable lawyer. And then not only that, a passionate Pan-African, but a developer, a scientist, everything, the skills that we have. But are we ready? Are we ready when, like he's giving this institution? I like this one, AIABS that you're talking about. And then one other thing, just imagine Ethiopia is producing the best coffee ever in the world. And now just because of a stupid conflict, we're going to pull back our economies and our good coffee that, one of those products. Of course, I don't know, Ethiopians drink a lot of coffee. Africans will also have to learn drinking coffee so that we can start consuming our own naturals as well. And so the conflict is not helping. It can never, ever help. It is only a setback, and we don't want to get into 2022 with that. Thank you so much, my brother. Over to you. I say I love the smile.
Dr. Tata, it's the Institute of African Botanic Science, IABS.
Institute of
African
Botanical Science.
So what I want to do, I want to, with your permission, get one of the leading African botanic scientists, Dr. Clayton Shillingford, on your program. He's now in his 80s, but he's done great work at DuPont Labs. And with what's left of his life, he may want to say a few things about that. So you can make a call so we can convene that maybe online. I'm not a botanic scientist, but I did do agriculture at least up to O-level Cambridge University. So I do have a fascination for that. But that's the kind of practical thing that Pan-African TV can do, because you have become now connective tissue. Make no mistake about it. You are now a convener. And what Dr. Tata has been asked to do by Almighty God is to be the convener of our best minds.
Okay.
So our people now can have exchanges with each other of a kind that our governments are too blind to see. You know what I thought of when I listened to you a moment ago? It occurred to me, you made a very powerful point. We're asking about return. But have we created the integrative mechanisms? Have we created the enabling environment? Have we created the infrastructure so that folks, when they return, can get to work in an environment that is going to maximize their productivity? It's not enough to say, come home. That's nice to say. Come home. It's nice. But, if someone has been living overseas for 5 years, 10 years, and they're accustomed to certain ways of doing things, we have to study how we integrate that diaspora, scientists, academicians, creative artists, into the structures that are at home. So what I thought is, in Africa, we in every country have a Ministry of Defense. Most times the arms in those ministries of defense are not to fight Martians from Mars. They're not to fight invaders from somewhere else. Most times, those ministries of defense are not to defend the country, but to repress democracy in those countries.
Mm-hmm.
So what if we took some of the monies from those ministries of defense and we created ministries of diaspora affairs dedicated to studying how we are going to work with our diaspora populations in ways that are creative and meaningful to allow for the technology transfer,
Mm-hmm.
to allow for the skills and knowledge transfer,
Mm-hmm.
to allow for the capital flows. As you and I were talking about different platforms, we talk about MoneyGram, we're talking about Western Union. None of those companies are African companies, but they're very dominant in the money transfer space. So these ministries, I believe, where they are properly led, properly invested, would be the biggest and best investment that every African country can make right now.
Absolute. One other ministry that I think, or it's the basic ministry, as we always have been saying, is education. Education, like when we talk about education, we always are going to the curriculum. Anyway, spirituality and cultural values, history, that's a fact. But the education of business, the education, the taboos, the cultural differences, the impact of and of an African American, even though of a descendant that has been brought up in this culture to think and operate in that environment. I just take a very simple information. We might also, and it's a statistic, it's a fact. I know it already. The conference we're developing, we're testing, and you can say it 1,000,000 times. It is like when people are comfortable already. Now, the next strategy is, how do I relocate those that are already on existing structure? How do I offer that? So you need the education of not just marketing. I don't like that term in terms of corporate, but we're talking in terms of us, trying to focus on even that. Africans have come up really with a lot of things, but the education to consume what is us, Black-owned community things, are projects that really just not only generate income for individuals, but actually go back to build the infrastructures that we're creating. For me, that's the biggest challenge. These tools, this technology could be created, but then the machineries is what you're talking about. That's why we need the media. We need platforms that promote. We need platforms that advertise Black-owned creative products. It's not about racist. It's not about being. It's just about a technology that puts money in our own very existence and in our own very society. I can imagine like this Institute of Agriculture that you're saying, thousands of young people would benefit from it. We already see them doing it on their own, struggling to do manure, struggling to grow, from just local things. You see them doing it every day. But we're talking about an institution that could even just groom people. Why is China, like we're talking all the times we've been saying, we can say it 1,000 times, but it's an education of the mind. The more we repeat it, it seems as if people are getting it. Because education doesn't just really mean that we're going to be sitting in these classes, and that's the one thing that I love about the conferencing. We did the conferencing, or the developers did it with a vision that can host the whole of the continent. It is not limited in a participant that you say, oh, no, I have a Zoom class that is limited, or the other existing. No, because it was developed with the idea to empower and to enrich the continent. All the futures are unlimited because it's about educating ourselves how to stay and consume our own, so that we put our own very money and the value that you're talking into the continent. So I think that aspect, could you just say a little bit about it? How do we really train ourselves? It's a change management process, I know, and it's very, very difficult. That's one of the hardest. Africans are so consuming, they consume who made who by who.
Sister Tata, you have raised a very important point. I come back to Bob Marley because Bob Marley was a sage.
Yes.
He was a prophet. Bob Marley said, and again, I'm not a singer, but I come back to him. He said, liberate yourself from mental slavery. Only yourself can free your mind. Now, that may sound cliche, but it's so true. It's true because at the end of the day, we have to decide, each of us as individuals first, what animates us. So you're right. There are a lot of things I could be doing this afternoon. I have guests at my home, people I love, I don't see often. But I took the time to be with you because it was important.
Yes.
Okay? You have African leaders now, and some of them, the biggest thing they can do is to go out and buy a $1,000 or £1,000 bag by Louis Vuitton.
Can you imagine?
Or Gucci or some nonsense like that. While there are villages where people don't have any bandages, where there are schools that don't have any books, where there are laboratories that are broken down and have no regions.
Girls without sanitary pad. Local girls sitting at home because they can't even go to school because they don't have sanitary pad in 21st century. In a continent that is flowing with milk and water.
I'm going to call them out. There was a program recently on 60 Minutes on Equatorial Guinea, and it was a shame. The president's son in Paris with a Bentley, and the poverty in that country, despite all the oil money, the amount of theft that takes place. So we have to purge our minds. We have to purge our minds of these poisonous viruses of selfishness, of corruption, of tribalism, of violence in our orientation, of prejudices that are of no use really, of colorism, of classism. We have to eradicate those poisonous elements from our thought processes. And we have to every day be diligent in filling our minds with that which is productive, which is meaningful, which is born of fraternity and solidarity, and of reaching towards the exaltation of equality among humanity. I told you when we first met, my first computer class, I'd never taken a computer class before. Gentleman walks in, goes to the board, and he writes 4 letters. G-I-G-O. Gigo. He said to the class of about 35 people 40 years ago next year, do you all know what that means?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's right. He says a computer is just like a human being. If you program it with good code, you'll get good results. You program it with bad code, you'll get bad results. Garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage out.
So all the listeners, stop listening to all these soap operas and, useless television. I mean, there's meaningful television like Pan-African TV. Watch that. Watch Pan-African TV. But, we have to be more discriminating as to what we put into our minds. Let's get into our minds stuff on history, on science, on sociology, on development, that when we are through absorbing those works, then we're better human beings. We can teach somebody. We can lead somebody. And we can do it with honesty and generosity of spirit and sincerity. Because nothing is worse in humanity than an insincere person. Because someone who is not sincere is not trustworthy. And we need leaders that are trustworthy, that you can put your trust in them, that when you give them the position of head of state or head of government, they're not going to steal. They're not going to use their positions to kill, but to benefit just their families or their tribe or their particular village, but that they have a global perspective of where Africa is and what Africa has to do to become a better place for all Africans at home and abroad. And so when people who are non-Africans, white or Asian, come to Africa, we can welcome them from a position of pride in what we've been able to achieve, and with a modicum of respect and self-confidence. The same way when we go to China, a Chinese person has pride and confidence in his country,
Absolutely.
or a German person has pride and confidence in his country.
Nothing wrong with that. I share. Nothing wrong with that. Because sometimes that's also the point that I think, yeah, we're learning, we're holding this conversation. Everybody has his own perspective, but I think we are discussing in a collective mindset of what are the things that actually pull us back that we can begin to actually distinguish. We also should really distinguish this attitude. And that's why I like the point when you talked about, we have to distinguish even what racism is all about, right? Because if we go through black nationals and say we want to consume black made own things, right? Honestly, another somebody would see it like this is racist. Yeah, why do you say they don't? No, that has anything to do, nothing to do with that. It's a context. And we see all these economies have built that on that kind of faithfulness to their culture and their productions. Germany, for instance, Germany is so proud and it's known for durable and quality goods. But are you sure? But that's the brand. And Germans, if a
Dr.
Benz,
Tata, stick a pin in that for a moment. Stick a pin in
yes,
that for a moment. You made an excellent point about Germany. Okay?
yeah,
If the Germans had not set up the gymnasiums and the vocational education institutes to teach metalworking and
handwork,
craftsmanship,
yes,
all of those things, would Germany have the technical competence it has today? If
never.
Germany was peopled by a bunch of lazy, no good leaders who took the state's money and went and put it in China or South America or someplace else, would Germany have the level of development that it has today? I was reading an article on Angela Merkel. I don't know the lady. I've never met the lady. I'm not a member of a political party or anything of that kind. But something struck me that I heard about her that I was really happy to hear. I was told that she shops her own groceries, that she lives in a very modest dwelling, and that she has been very, let's say, thrifty in the use of state resources in the way of development of German interests, not in development of herself and her family. Am I correct? Is that true? You're in Germany.
Um, yes, of course. It's you're correct because being conservative and being faithful to your own Germanness is
Yes.
one of the rules in the German culture. What has made Germany from a broken state? Do not be aware that Germany, as I can say, is just 30 years old.
Yes.
Even we look at the empire but if you look at the Berlin Wall,
Yes.
that was in the
The
90s.
GDR and the Federal Republic back
Exactly.
together.
Yeah, so you can see that short period. It's a young country. And if you
Yeah.
look at our own brokenness and to say 30 years, they came out from other, oppressions to become that. And what was it that actually defined them? We've talked about it a couple of times, but I think these are case studies that we will start looking at from how also other countries came from brokenness to being what they are today. Of course, we would also agree that, yeah, they don't go looking for raw materials or doing some kind of deals like they're doing. But let's stick on that, what you just said, to say they had to redefine who is a German. What does it mean to be a German before they could build a strong Germany? And so it's the same thing we are saying. We have to redefine who is an African. What does it mean being an African? And that's the reason when they took that time to build those values in them, then they label themselves durable and quality, not just in terms of their brands and products, but even in the personality. Every young German or a German child knows I am a quality and I'm durable.
That's
So
right.
it's
That's
a
right.
mindset kind of an education, like you are saying, to say, how do we, these industries that you're talking about, the vocational trainings, I mean, they constitute, particularly in Baden-Württemberg, where I am in the southern, 40% of the GDP of the economy. These are households. These are handmade like our own. Look at the continent. We have 90, I can say 90%. Look at our market women. Look at people with talent that have it, but we don't have that institution and that leadership that is saying, even if you can just be a braider, we are going to train you You know, you have a 3 years vocational training and you being the best braider. It's not only training you, but the government then would give you maybe a startup and then you can go. So
Yeah.
it is not rocket science. I keep saying it for us to develop Africa. It's just easy. And it would not even take us 2063. It won't even. We're talking of, yes, we can say it's a small economy of 80 a million. But if you look at Belgium and say Belgium, which is like a patchwork of country, would colonize a whole continent, a country like Congo. What is it that they use? How?
Well, Dr. Tata, I'm so fascinated by this conversation. The Germans got to where they got by prodigious, relentless effort focused on education. Education in the sciences and technology, vocational education, making things, value adding in Germany, not simply importing things, but they had leadership that was wise and unselfish, that really was committed to the development of Germany, not of a personality, a particular party, or a particular segment. Interestingly, Merkel was not born in the Federal Republic. She was born in what is now considered all Eastern Germany, the German Democratic Republic, GDR. And so, as I listen to you, I realize what it means to be African means, first of all, to be concerned about Africa in a sincere way. There are many people in Africa, I say to my wife sometimes and friends, who are born in Africa, but they're not African. Because the moment they get some money, the moment they get some power, they show their treachery. They take that money, they take that power to steal, and then they take that money and they put it overseas in offshore accounts, or they engage in corruption. Someone who is corrupt is not an African. Is not really someone who's a sincere person. An African is someone who loves Africa, who educates himself about Africa, educates himself or herself about Africa, and invests his time and effort to better the conditions of the people in Africa. That's the real African. Simple. So if you don't have pride in Africa, if you're not spending your time educating yourself about Africa, writing about Africa, seeking to forward partnerships to improve the quality of life of Africans, wherever they may be, then you're not an African. You may be black, but that doesn't say much of anything.
Absolutely. We do also understand that the root cause of all this, and that's why we also saying Germany should also take a responsibility over its colonial history. That's very important, because if you look at the basis of that education, then we come back to the sector of the curriculum that we're talking about. It is impossible. We all studied European history. We never even studied African history.
Mind you, I'm not. So while I'm crediting the Germans with what they did in science and technology, I'm not giving the Germans a pass for what they did in Namibia.
Exactly.
With the Herero and the Herero that they killed and the massacre, the genocide. No, don't confuse that. They have to face that, and they have to face that in a way to pay compensation where due.
Absolutely.
They have to commit themselves to accepting that they did things that were wrong, and the first act of contrition is out of accepting personal responsibility.
I share. Exactly. That's just what I wanted our audience to understand, that taking this kind of case studies doesn't mean, but of course we have to, if I'm saying we are taking, or we're coming from the Pan-African Daily, and I've spent how many 23 years of my life here, I must have something that I came to do. I didn't just come, study, work, pay bills, eat and sleep and die. No. The first thing that was of interest was, this is a place sitting in partition my continent into peace in 1884 in Berlin. Is 5 hours from me. And so for me, it was very interesting to what is it that they did actually? And what is it that, we can learn from it. And that's how I started the projects and just go through to see, and how did it come that, after this separation between West Germany and East Germany, now they could build another strong economy onto becoming that strongest economy. You talked about Angela Merkel. She's called like mother, like we call Mother Africa. She's called Mutti. Mutti means mother because she's respected. But she's been there for 16 years. And now Germans are also discussing they just had a new president. They discussing in their constitution to say, oh no, 16 years, that would have been much. We're going to get 2 terms of 4 years like America is doing. But bet to you, Angela, even if she had to be there again for the next 4 years, they will vote her because of the leadership and the accountability. That is it. So even staying 40 years, 50 as a leader, probably maybe is not a problem if you are good, if your citizens are good, if you're accountable, if you're responsible. People would even like you to stay there, because for me, I also think being a leader is too much responsibility. At some point in time, no amount of money would actually have to pay you to be a leader if you're good. But if you're staying and it's not working, what is the question? I think that's the research Africans should be doing, and we see how all of us can begin to bring our own engagement. We met it a couple of times, Brother Gabriel. The leadership on the continent, if we see there are 54 countries, it means 54 presidents. If we go to prime ministers, 54. If we made a total of all in these countries, they're not going to be maybe 6,000 or 10,000, but we are 1.3 on the continent and in the diaspora. So the majority is we are many, as a matter of fact, and we can contribute by just starting this kind of institutions that you're saying. Go back to ourselves, go back to the basics, take the responsibility into ourselves. That's also one thing that Germans do. They don't rely on that leadership, even though it's there, it gives them, but it's just been trained that I'm brought in to bring something. I gave a clear example the other day. They have a system that is called, you have to do a social year in every institution. It's mandatory for every German. So if 80 million Germans every year would give 1 year for free to the government to work for free, so that's already generating the economy. So when we are saying we go back to a passionate way of building from the root, it means we have a lot to sacrifice to even put that basis before we can even develop on it. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to go back to that point to say we are not saying in any way that they are good by what they did. That history is still going to catch up with them. But what is it that when we look at how did they develop also from their own past, and now they are they used to beg also from neighboring countries. You know how their history, you know how what France and America and Russia did to them is miserable, but what they also did in the world, right? So we can make it Africa. We really can in a very short time.
Indeed. And thank you so much for that point. You focus there on that 1 year of free labor, something that really we seek to engrave on the minds of their citizens, the whole concept of service. It's not enough to be a doctor or lawyer or an engineer or businessman, but each of us must take some time and be possessed of a certain social responsibility ethic. That is, we must find some time to volunteer, to give back. It's not enough to take from the society that nourished you, but you need to give back in your communities. To go to a school and to mentor, to help out with relief if there's a disaster, to help with the Red Cross, to do things like that. It humanizes you, see? Because someone who's just taking, the taker, never giving of themselves in service, can never really be a supreme human being. They're still stuck at the level of beast. And at the level of beast, they tear at the flesh of their brother and sister in fratricidal conflict, in racism, in prejudice, in classism, in colorism. But when you are a person who gives of yourself, who is charitable and who understands the importance of love among all God's children, you then have a degree of what you call social responsibility ethic. And as a business person, we practice that. We feel it important to work with our schools and with our youth to try to share what it is we have with them in whichever way we can. And that way we can be comfortable that we are not simply taking from the society within which we reside, but we are making contributions that have nothing to do with money. Of course, we have to make money to stay in business, but money must not be the sole objective of business. Okay? Business must also have a strong social responsibility ethic dedicated to the proposition that we are each other's keeper, and we do better when we have a society that is fair, meritocratic, and democratic, and where we have a society where there's equality of opportunity to the degree that a young child, a young boy or girl, can have the opportunity, if they are energetic, if they are diligent, if they are industrious, if they are driven, they can have a better life.
Ashe. Thank you very much. I think this has been a very productive conversation today. And I think, I mean, each time you're here, you can see your following is so huge. People that are watching and commenting, and it's a very interactive session where people listen, they ask questions, they throw comments on the chat, and I bring some up. Even within them also, you know, they pick up the knowledge and they share in the group. I love this family on the Pan-African Daily. And you were very so right, brother, when you said this is a convener. I can guarantee you the Pan-African Daily TV family is a conscious one, very conscious one. And in a short time, we have developed ourselves, all of us. None of us came here knowing anything, none of us. But the level at which we have grown, and even the groups that have been created, initiatives that have come out only from these conversations that you come here to educate us and to give us a way. And to, I mean, you'll not be shocked. Your 2 shows that you've done here, people have already picked that knowledge. They've created groups and they're creating. So we even call ourselves not just like a TV because we say TV. It's really something that we say is a center for Kemetic knowledge, right? From us to us. And we want to appreciate you so much. The 2 hours or 3, if you know the impact of you just sitting here and mentoring us on this session, I mean, you would know that you don't need to just send money to Africa, but just being here is too much of development that we need. And so we truly appreciate you and we thank you. We're going to follow up with that conference tomorrow. And in the worst case, you can record it and then we would restream it again. But like I said, in the future, we're going to be using Conferencing Africa. And if you were on Conferencing Africa, we would just connect it because you stream it live on every platform that you want. That's also something that is being implemented. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tata.
One last word, please, before you go.
Well, I don't know who Paul Brown is, but he said something that's true. He's on the program. He says, we are here to serve, and that's so true.
Yes.
None of us can take it with us. Let me repeat what I said. Whatever God has poured into us, we have to find a way to pour it into others before we leave.
Absolute.
And that is how we live lives as true Africans, as true humanitarians, as true human beings, to really be able to celebrate life by serving others and sharing the best we can. So I want to thank you, Queen Tata, not Dr. Tata, Queen Tata, for your kindness, for your love, for your beauty, for your vibration. You have positive vibration. You know, you exude a degree of confidence and love of Africa. And we are thankful for your service. We're thankful for your efforts to educate us, to bring us together. And if one botanist, just one, would contact you and maybe pull 1 or 2 other people together, we can begin that Institute of Botanical Sciences.
Yes.
Because the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tomorrow, I don't really celebrate birthdays, but my community is, no, you have to come. You're a December 12th daughter.
It's your birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Dr. Tata.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So tomorrow,
many more years of beauty and grace and understanding and teaching.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. I do appreciate you too. So yes, we'll keep in touch with you. And like that institute that you're saying, that's a one-touch thing because a lot, just a lot in that sector in the different countries that we know that are also
Yes.
operating. And if you can bring something like that together, let's talk after the conversation or in the next coming weeks, and we can put something together already. Okay.
Indeed, indeed, because food security is very important, and you need to understand plant science if you're going to. There's no culture without agriculture.
Sure.
There's no culture without agriculture. So if we can do that in Institute of African Botanic Science, I think would make a meaningful impact on the quality
Mhm.
of lives of our people at home and abroad. So thank you very much, Dr. Tata, for having
Thank
me,
you,
and God
sir.
bless you. And I wish all of your guests in the future and all your listeners best compliments of the season, and for a very happy Christmas, Kwanzaa, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the best to greetings and a happy season for you and your family and your loved ones and all our brethren worldwide. We keep in touch and we see us very soon. Bye-bye.
God bless you, Dr.
Bye.
Tata. Bye bye.
Ashe. Bye.
Bye bye.
Good, 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 good. Thank you for everyone. Oh my goodness. I see Queen Sanovia and Riley and Kalena and everybody already say, oh, Susan, happy birthday. Honestly speaking, I was pulled to this conversation by our brother Kofi Zuma. I mean, he's a testimonial right here with me. Kofi said, no, it's not possible. I don't celebrate birthdays, to be honest with you. It's not because sometimes people say, oh, you are you afraid to get old? No, 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 that's not just the point. I never was brought up to celebrate birthdays. My mom or our family in the communities, like I used to tell you, I'm a village girl, grew up in the village. We never knew anything like a birthday. Every day was a happy day to celebrate. Every day was a time to. And so when I relocated in a very tender age to live with my brothers in the city, in the township, Bamenda, and that's when we start seeing, at a certain days, girls would come out or children would gather and they would drink a Fanta and they will eat sweet bonbons, and everybody will stand for a picture. And it never really actually matters anything, because each time when I went back for vacation in the village with my mom, and it didn't mean anything. The love was there, the food was there, the happiness was there. So there wasn't any time that was set as a particular time to celebrate something special, right? And so I've also grown up like that. Even with my family, my husband and I, we've never celebrated. Even our children, they don't know anything like get a Christmas present, get a birthday present. Every day is a day to celebrate. They get all those things at times that we don't even celebrate Christmas or all this kind of vacations. So no, 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 no. So it was just love all around the place. But what happened is Kofi told me, no, 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 Susan, you have to be on the show tomorrow. We have to discuss with you. If you are a December 21 girl, right? FY, a Friday born, and all that. So we just want to ask and share some questions celebrate with you. Then I was thinking, yeah, but what am I going to give? What am I going to actually give? Because like with us, it's a matter of not just celebrating, but it's also giving. And of course, that's what even make it amazing how we did. It's so crazy how it's always the poor people or the so-called poor that are the ones that give, right? And so it never was, I am celebrating because I want to take something. Like in the culture, I don't know why the West always admit things opposite from what we do. So celebration will be like, you have to bring presents or you give me stuff. And yes, of course, I do agree. You need to give me, but I'll tell you what you need to give me, okay? And if that is the case, if you even just want to give, because you already give me so much love, so much attention, so much support. We're always gathering here. You tap my energy, I tap your energy. How much more can I be grateful for that? It's just too much. It's just, I don't even know what I should celebrate, So, but it has always been that we give. So I started thinking, as Kofi said, no, you have to come because we're having a guest tomorrow. No, 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 we can postpone the guest, but we just want to spend time with you, you to spend time with us. It's boring out here and that. That's okay. But what am I going to give? What am I going to give you? What am I going to give to you on the Earth Day, on the December 12th? Remember, we did a research about December 12th movement out there in the Americas and I think it was Dr. Wade Nobles that was on the show that, and he educated us. And I keep asking, what was that movement of December 12th? It was so interesting to me because I really wanted to know how these things fuse together, to bring out, a situation where you say there's nothing that is a coincidence. And when he said it was the first freedom movement, December 12th, then I like, so that is the reason I transited and came from my ancestors for this freedom. And that's why I've been doing everything that I've been doing in my life. So sometimes these things are not just a coincidence. They take us back to really reflect and give us a reason why, thank you, why we are the way we are. And so for me, even when we grew up, we started teaching our boys and the community and all the kids that we've been mentoring with all our projects, all of us worldwide, to say there is nothing like a special day that I came. I didn't choose to come because the West has westernized everything. All these days are just to buy, always making money. Of course, even when they sit and say, oh no, we drink, we go out, we share some flowers, and even, I don't know. But I want to thank Kofi anyway for bringing out that initiative to say, no, just can we just want to spend time with you. Probably there's some stories that you want to share with us from your childhood. I like village stories because they're so amazing. They're nothing that is compared to it. I mean, I also know all type of stories, but the ones that I think are so empowering and so full of energy are the ones that I know when I was growing up, like, crossing the rivers in the night with no light and stuff like that. But, these are things I would like to metamorphose and do them again, but in my consciousness. Because at that time I used to like, oh, I'm a poor girl, we fancy those that were also growing up in the city. But to tell you, there has never been a blessing in my life in growing up like that. And every day I'm so grateful for it. And particularly you that have never been on the continent, when I tell these stories, it's not just like everything is just like, it's just giving you, particularly our children out there that have never been on the continent. They've never even seen snakes. They've never seen insect. They've never seen mosquitoes or other things. We grow up in another pattern. And the only thing I can give you is that thing that you never have heard it. You've seen it in Tarzan. They've manipulated the information and you begin to look at it. And because these are the kind of stories that make our diaspora, like our brother was saying, scary of the continent. But what I try to do is I bring you the reality and the paradise that the whole world is looking for on that continent is exactly that point. When they go, they look for our rivers, they look for our villages, our vegetation. It's a different setup. Absolutely. If I didn't grow up like that, I wouldn't have any story to tell in my life. And so I try also to bring our kids that are born into diaspora, who go to the supermarket and buy mangoes in a carton. They don't know where mangoes come from. They just see bananas that are raw. They don't even know how a banana plant look like, right? And they look at avocados and stuff like that. Some people think, oh, bananas, did they grow like, or papao or something, just basic things. Or they eat chicken every day coming from the supermarket. And then when they see a live chicken, they don't even know what that is that they eat every time. Probably if they know that was a live chicken, they wouldn't even eat egg. So it is so important that when we sit and hold this conversation and talk about this kind of things, it empowers us. It gives us another humanity class of level, and that to show you that exactly where they call poverty is just exactly where the paradise is. That's where the riches are. Okay. And the so-called poor are the ones that give to the rich because they know how to give. The rich don't give. That's why they own money, because they're so stingy. They're so selfish. They never give anything out. If they would have been giving, the world would not have been lacking, right? But it's even the poor. Look at the churches, how much money they make from the poor, because the poor give generously. And the so-called people that they call they're marginalized. And these are the so-called people that they're raising funds worldwide. Germany, for instance, oh, we give the aid and development to these poor people because of no. They're just taking everything out of them. Okay. So tomorrow is going to be that day. It's gonna be that we're gonna have those conversations. If you have a question, if you have anything that you want to know, please, and you want us to talk about it, because I don't know what we're gonna be talking about. Probably what I've been doing in Germany for the past 20 years. What are the challenges that I've also gone through? Do I sit every day here and laugh? Doesn't mean that I don't have a pain. Or I mean, when I raised the voice here as a young mother, students, my husband and I were students, and built massive projects out here. What was it that I went through? So probably these are all the kind of things that I would like to give to anyone that would feel empowered, that thinks, oh, Annie just sits here every evening and laughs. It's like if the whole world is just surrounding her. No, no, no. I would like to also go into some of those uncomfortable moments in the Pan-African Daily, where after the show I go back and just cry. You know, when we hear about some challenges on the continent, I'll be like, oh my God, how did I get here? Why did I start this? You know, or sometimes in the night, people will just call you because of the time difference, you know. And there's some calls, Naisha will have to push it to me. No, Mama, you have to get this. Because why should we get it now, Naisha? We just off camera. Or you finish the camera and then you have to speak again for 2 hours with somebody who was watching the show but had a question, you know. So it is not just always, but how do we accommodate all these things? It's just because of the love that we all share, the harmony. Okay, so let's do this tomorrow, and I'll be presenting my birthday or Earth Day gift, what I call a gift to the legacy of the African child and the young people and us in general. So I'll be presenting some platforms that we've been working on, that we're creating, and for me, that's a gift. That's a gift. That's a legacy that we're building to leave for our young people, to create jobs, to be innovative, and what more else, so that when we sit and relax and dance to samba and whatever, we can see our young children feeling free, you know, making choices according to what they want, not because they must. Or our girls going without sanitary pads. I mean, that should not happen in our generation. We are many and we can do better. So thank you. Let's see us tomorrow, same time. And we'll be having these conversations here. Thank you so very much. And yeah, good night. Good night to all of you. Bye-bye. Tukupamo.
You are watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan-African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa.